afternoon, good evening, good morning. I guess we have no idea when you're actually watching us here. Hello, good day. I'm Father Darryl Millette here in Saskatoon. And with me, as usual, Father Michael out in San Francisco for episode
Out here.
52 of Homily Chat. Hello.
Hello, episode 52. So if we were actually on top of our game and doing one episode a week, that would mean we've done 1 year. But we've done, I think, 1 year in about 2.5 months. So it's a good test for us about how often we're not doing it, which means that's okay. Things happen, life happens, people understand. But yes, good to be with you. And, usually if you didn't get to watch last week's episode, we usually say that I am just south of San Francisco, but now I'm in San Francisco. I'm in my new parish. And even though it's only about 15 miles apart, it's a huge difference. The place I was about 15 miles south of here is below what's called the fog line. And so the weather there today is about 85 degrees Fahrenheit, but where I am, it's about 57 degrees. And so it's almost 30 degrees Fahrenheit difference in those 15 miles. We're actually setting records for cold days here in San Francisco.
Wow. And 30 degrees Fahrenheit is like what, about
I think it's about
like 18 Celsius or something? I don't know.
yeah, 16 or 17 degrees Celsius. So
Sure.
it's a 16 or 17 degree difference in oh, now I have to do miles to kilometers. Oh my
Exactly.
gosh.
So that's like
So about 25 kilometers, 18, 17 degrees difference. So whatever it is, it's a short amount of distance for a big degree difference.
And by the way, you can just see if you're watching this, just behind my shoulder, it looks like there's a cone attached to a dog. That's because there's a cone attached to a dog. She had some minor surgery done, and she's got to wear the cone of shame for a little while.
Mm-hmm,
And unfortunately, she didn't have the cone of shame on for part of Monday morning, and proceeded to take out a suture. So that didn't get put back. She's got the cone now, and it's not coming off.
Yes, she does. So. And that cone of shame will be on there for a little bit. But also, this last week was a big day, not just the dog surgery, but there was a big day, your anniversary. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How many years is that? Was it 15?
14.
14. No, sorry, I don't want to age you any bit.
Well, a good friend of mine who's also often watching the podcaster, Jane, posted a picture. Myself, her, and her husband from that day, from that evening. I'd love to say I look exactly the same, but that would be a minor lie. So, But yeah, even now, 14 years.
Yeah, I'm at 4 years, and I look at the days of my ordination day picture, and I kind of like, ooh, to be that young again, that would be nice. So,
Yep. I'm working on my Jean-Luc Picard hairdo and the whole thing, right? So, Anyway, very good. And thank you, Lisa, in the chat here too. So awesome. So this is going to be an interesting episode because as we were getting ready to record, I mentioned to Father Michael that I don't have a homily ready to go. Do you have a homily ready to go?
I said I don't have a homily ready to go. I said the thing I'm finding is it's amazing how much busier I am and how much more my days are filled with different tasks as a pastor than they were when I wasn't a pastor. And it has led to the point where it's now Wednesday evening, afternoon when we're recording this. And yes, I have read it. Yes, I've done a little bit of reading on it, but I don't yet really have a direction for the homily. So you really have kind of caught us in the brainstorming phase. Is a chance really to kind of look at the stages a little bit before when we usually are. So it's good that this is Wednesday and not Saturday morning or Saturday midday before the Saturday Vigil Mass.
This is very true. Been there too, by the way. But anyway, yeah. Yeah, so there's the first reading is actually a fascinating one too. Woe to you shepherds, it's fun.
Yeah.
But should we read a gospel? I don't know. Do you want me to read it? Do you want to read it?
Yeah. I know this is not the week to lay into this, but you read it for me last week, so now it's my turn to read it for you. Okay. So on the week we don't know it, we'll go with a more experienced priest to kick us off there.
Great. Great.
So I have a reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Glory to you, O Lord. The apostles gathered together with Jesus and reported all they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while." People were coming and going in great numbers, and they had no opportunity even to eat. So they went off in the boat by themselves to a deserted place. People saw them leaving, and many came to know about it. They hastened there on foot from all the towns and arrived at the place before them. When he disembarked and saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Few things going on in this rather short gospel this week. It's interesting. The apostles, they'd just been sent on their mission. If you remember last week, just been sent on their mission. We're sent out 2 by 2. We're told to go heal the sick and do all the preaching and all this kind of stuff. And it was a great moment of Jesus extending his ministry. And then they return and they share. They tell him everything that they had done. And, I think there's actually not a bad thing there in that, all of us in whatever vocation we're all called to share Jesus Christ, to share in mission, in whatever vocation we have. But, the disciples were grounded in returning to Jesus and just sharing with him what it went. In other words, we might call it prayer, that when we're engaged in ministry, whatever it happens to be, whether, us as a priest or, someone who's raising a family, very much a ministry, to check in with Jesus Christ every once in a while, tell him how it's going. It's not like it's new information for him, but to tell him how's it going, what is it that we're experiencing, and just to reconnect with him. Very important. I think it's actually a really good pattern for all of us. I don't know if that's the way I'm going to go with this homily, because again, I'm workshopping this. But just going, little section by section, that really kind of strikes me. That they return, and there it is. They go right to him and they tell him, "Hey, this is what happened. This is how it went."
Mm-hmm. That was one of the first things that struck me as well. And I didn't go immediately to prayer, kind of that daily check-in. I was looking at more kind of a more infrequent check-in. I looked at it as kind of the need for retreat. This sounds a lot like a retreat to me. If you look at retreat houses, they're very rarely in the heart of the city. They're often kind of away in nature a little bit. And so this idea of come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while, just seems to me a lot like a retreat. And it's remarkable because every priest is required by canon law to take a retreat every year. Of course, you did it during the seminary, and it's something I encourage everyone to do. And I know it can be very, very difficult for people with jobs and families to find that time. And so I almost want to say, even if you can't take, 5 days or 3 days or a weekend away for a retreat, find some way to make retreat a part of your life. Maybe it's an hour, maybe it's a half hour, just a kind of a time to come away to a deserted place and rest a while. I had a friend who had some small kids, and she said, "Well, I can't get away for 3 or 4 days. I can't get away for this time of retreat." But she said, "You know what I can do is one morning a week, I can wake up a half hour early, brew a nice strong cup of coffee, go sit on the front porch and take that time with Jesus." And it is kind of that dedicated prayer time that becomes a retreat. But also, I think a proper retreat is not just 24 hours of prayer. It is a lot, what it says here, just rest a while. I had a retreat master once who said, the first thing you should do when you get on retreat is change your alarm clock to 1 hour later than you normally get up. Minimum, so that you're sleeping a little bit, because your body kind of needs that rest and relaxation. You need it as a chance to kind of reconnect with Jesus. And so, that idea stuck out to me right away when I was reading the gospel.
Yeah, no, a lot of wisdom there. It's in some cases it can be a real challenge, as you say, to find that time of retreat. I mean, there's times, I've had people tell me, the best thing I can do is shut the bathroom door for a couple minutes. Do it then, right? Like, that if that's what you can do, then that's not a bad practice either. So, I saw somebody who, she would go into the minivan and shut the door. Run the air conditioning because it was hot out, but yeah.
And maybe you help yourself by preparing some of those things in advance. Maybe you get a little basket and put a rosary, on top of the toilet or on the medicine stand, so that when you are able to kind of shut the door there, you say, oh, okay, this is a chance to pray a decade of the rosary. You take that kind of mini retreat, or you put a rosary in the glove compartment or in the cup holder, so that when you take that retreat out to the minivan in the air conditioning in the middle of the summer, you have kind of something there to help you with it. So
Yeah. No, that's very good. In the comment, Gloria is commenting about my dog. Chloe allows you to shut the door. Yeah. Sometimes. I mean, it's an interesting gospel because it begins with this call to rest, come to the deserted place, return to Jesus, share with him everything. Like you say, the call to retreat, and then what's Jesus turn around and do right away? No more.
Started ministering again.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to try to hold these two things together, because Jesus turns it right around and has compassion and serves the crowd, even though he's probably tired. I guess there's a few ways you could look at it. I don't know, like the fact that he does identify with the fact that sometimes we're tired, and life demands that we serve anyway. And I think he's in real solidarity with us when that happens, because that happens to everybody. And everyone goes through different seasons of life, perhaps, where that happens quite a bit. And sometimes it's not a bad idea just to be reminded that, the Lord is with you in this. But yeah, there's probably different ways. Did anything strike you in particular with that section of the gospel?
So there are a couple things, but something you were talking about that struck me is a story, and it may be apocryphal, and apocryphal means it may be true, it may not be true, but it is a story I've heard from kind of multiple sources. And it's a story of a saint or a mystic or someone who was praying, and they were, a mother so I think in the story I heard they were a mother. And so at night they were having this kind of mystical experience, and they had this kind of apparition of Mary. And so they were actually almost having this conversation with Mary. And they're in the midst of this deep mystical experience with Mary, this deep prayer experience. And all of a sudden they hear the baby crying, in the next room. And they say, I shouldn't leave this mystical experience. And one of the things Mary says is, that's your prayer right now. Your prayer right now is that baby crying. And that sense, that's the story that was kind of reminded me as you were talking about this idea that, sometimes we are busy and we want to take that time away, but something else calls. And hearing kind of God's duty, or the duty God gives us, the mission he gives us, what he's calling us to do through the voice of someone else. Here it's the crowds that were coming that were hungry. In that story, it's the woman who was, heard the baby cry. It reminds me of a scene also in, what was that movie? Mel Gibson directed it, about the conscientious objector in World War II, who ended up becoming a medic in the army. And so it starred the guy who played Spider-Man. I forget his name, but so he plays this medic. He's at, what's that?
Depends which version of Spider-Man, I guess.
Yeah, the second version. So not the new versions and not the Tobey Maguire versions.
Okay. I don't know.
So yeah, but whatever. So Spider-Man he's this Seventh-day Adventist who, because of his religious beliefs, will not participate in violence. And so he serves as a medic in the army. And he's in with this invading force in one of the islands in the Pacific. And they've just had this absolutely brutal battle. And all night long, he has basically been taking injured soldiers back to, so what had happened is the U.S. Army had basically scaled this cliff and then was kind of overtaking this field on top of the cliff. And he spent all night dragging soldiers who were injured, and then with the pulley system kind of bringing them down. And the dawn is broken. He is exhausted physically, emotionally, mentally. I'm sure he's exhausted spiritually. And he's lying there, and he in the movie, he whispers this prayer. He says, God, what do you want me to do now? What am I supposed to do now? And then what you hear in the background is you hear a wounded soldier, help me, help, cry for help. And he kind of, his response is, thank you for the answer. That's what I'm called to do. And so he goes to assist that. And Claire says here, service can be prayers too. Absolutely. It can be prayers. And so it's one of those things of, I think, again, it's this idea of sanctifying everything we do, be it service, be it the work we do. I mean, I remember when I was in seminary, I was talking to my spiritual director, and I said, man, homework is so boring sometimes, and I just don't want to do it, and I don't see the kind of the spiritual benefit of it. And he said, have you ever tried to turn it into a prayer? Turn it into a kind of an offering for someone. He said, maybe as you sit down to write this paper, light a little candle on your desk. And he said, don't tell them, because I don't think you're actually supposed to light candles inside the seminary, but light a little candle and say, I'm going to offer this for this particular person. And I found that to help in my own life sometimes is when you get so busy, you get into tasks that you just don't want to do. In order to offer it up as a prayer, to choose a particular intention to offer it up as a prayer, rather than just saying, well, I'm going to offer this up for a generic prayer. To pick something in particular to offer it up for really, really helps. So
yeah, no, I like that a lot. That's the sacrament of the moment, I guess, would be a phrase for that as well. Yeah, offering up as a prayer. I mean, in the comments, Gloria makes the point too. It's good. You do need to balance this out with actual dedicated prayer as well. But Jesus shows us in this gospel, sometimes it ain't really possible. In that moment, God's calling us to something a little different. I would suspect that when Jesus was serving the crowds, it was very much a prayer for him, even though he might have been physically exhausted or who knows what, right? Like you've been watching The Chosen, the series The Chosen this season?
No, actually, that was on my agenda this evening, because I actually have this evening free after when we're done here. Was I was going to go download the app and watch the first episode. Are they hour episodes or are they half-hour episodes?
They're a little shorter than an hour. They're a little shorter.
Okay, so I'll probably watch the first episode tonight of season 1. So I'm just getting started.
I think, yeah, the one that's coming to mind, I think it is actually season 1. It's a fascinating scene. It's not exactly this phrase. I don't think it's this passage exactly, but there's a number of times in the Gospels where it just says that Jesus was with the people, and healing the people and whatever. And they show it always from like the point of view of the disciples. So Jesus is like in a tent, and there's just a huge lineup of people coming to see him, and you see the disciples, and actually the first 15 minutes of this episode is one unbroken shot, which is just stunning. For me as a photography geek, they shot it as the sun's going down. It was just absolutely incredible. And then, there's a whole thing. The disciples start squabbling with each other because that's just kind of what they do. It's what we do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And at the end of the episode, Jesus comes out of the tent and he is spent. Absolutely spent. And he goes to his tent, and his mother Mary comes to him and washes his feet, and he praises God and goes to bed. And it's just a really interesting example of what this ministry might have looked like. And it kind of like it jolts the disciples. So they're squabbling about whatever they're squabbling about. And then they see Jesus, who had just served all the people, and they go, oh, okay. What we were talking about ain't that important, So it's a very interesting, that Jesus went and did this, and he was absolutely exhausted. And I'm sure there were a number of times he was, and he's with us and all of that. And he gets it. Like he's the kind of savior, who's the kind of shepherd who's with his people, and he gets it. Yeah. I can't remember what episode that was. Anyways, I found it fascinating, but
sure. Well, I'm going to look for that one for sure. But then actually, it was interesting because I read 2 different commentaries on this gospel. And one of the things I found fascinating was one commentary had today's gospel as kind of one chunk or one kind of story. So the way that this commentary works is it gives you kind of this chunk of the gospel and then the commentary on it. And so the chunk was Mark 6:30 through 34, which is what this is. And then the other commentary that I read broke it into 2 pieces. So basically, when Jesus disembarks and sees the vast crowd is the beginning of kind of a different story or a different breakup to the story. And it was kind of interesting to look at it because it forces you to look ahead a little bit, because what we have right after this is one of the times Jesus feeds, the thousands of people with the breads and the fishes and the loaves. And so when you see this idea that when he disembarked and saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them. And they were like sheep without a shepherd, and began to teach them many things. That's leading right into one of the feeding stories. And so it's interesting to see, well, do you kind of place it as a bridge? Do you see it together here? Because the other thing that really comes to mind is this idea of a shepherd, because it ties into it the psalm and the first reading.
Yeah.
We get this imagery of a shepherd. So Jesus says, they were like sheep without a shepherd, is what he notices. The psalm, of course, is that real famous psalm, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, there's nothing I shall want. And the first reading from the book of Jeremiah, right? Woe to the shepherds who mislead and scatter the flock. The Lord is essentially preaching against those shepherds who are not doing the task of shepherding. And that's why one of the things I was thinking about is this is an incredible day to preach if you were preaching to a group of priests on retreat. Those who have the task of being those shepherds and to be a good shepherd and to look at that. And so I was kind of thinking like, oh man, if I was preaching at the seminary, this would be incredible. But preaching to people where we say, okay, well, the shepherds are those kind of appointed as leaders in the church. And so these are some of all kind of the thoughts going through my mind is do I hook into this shepherd theme a little bit, mm-hmm. and in doing so, how do I do it? With the idea, because I'm always self-conscious up there that I'm a priest and I've called to be a shepherd, as a pastor, the shepherd to my people. Do I preach about myself? How do I preach for them? In a way that isn't just kind of self-serving, the idea of a shepherd to me.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, at least, for those of us who are pastors, it's that first reading can be kind of an examination of conscience in a way. Kind of like it's every year in the breviary, there's several days in a row where we hear this homily from St. Augustine on pastors, and he kind of gives it to us. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's really, really good that it's in there, because it's like a yearly reminder of what it is we're called to be. But like you say, so to preach that to people in front of you who might not be pastors of a parish, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the 23rd Psalm could be something even just to reflect on that too. Because like you say, it is a very famous Psalm, often used, probably most often at funerals, at least from what I experience up here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I'd be going with that exactly, but there might be something there to preach on, just because it is such a famous psalm and the Lord describing himself as our shepherd.
Yeah,
it's actually quite profound.
Well, I think one of the things that was immediately came to or kind of popped into my head while you were talking about that is I remember Psalm 23, and I read a commentary on it once. It said a better translation is not so much the Lord is my shepherd about who he is, but rather the Lord shepherds me. That shepherd is a verb there. That shepherding is something we're called to and something that we do. That it's in essence a verb. And if you think about, of course, who is the most famous shepherd of the Old Testament, it's the shepherd David, who is called out, who slays Goliath, and who becomes king. And so I always think that this idea of being a shepherd is tied in with the idea of being a king. There is this relationship between shepherding and being a king. And of course, at our baptism, we were all baptized as priests, prophets, and kings. And so the idea, well, how do we fulfill our call to be priests, prophets, and kings, and to say, well, okay, maybe this week we just look at, well, what does it mean to be baptized into the kingship of Jesus Christ, into the shepherdhood of Jesus Christ, and how do we live that out in our life? And again, it's easy for it's pretty simple. It's not a lot of roads you have to connect to get the idea for how a priest is supposed to do it. But like the parents of a family are certainly called to the kingship in their family, to rule over that family together and to make those decisions. And I'd have to kind of think about it a little bit more about, well, what about other people who, perhaps are widowed and their kids are gone? How do they exercise kingship? How do children exercise kingship? Because everyone is baptized not into a future kingship, but into a present kingship, so that we're called to be kings, in sense, kings of our domain, and figuring out what that domain that God has entrusted us with. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. I don't know if you hear my dog whimpering in the background, but I don't know. Am I a shepherd of the whatever? Anyway, so yeah. I mean, there's also another story, and I think it involves Bishop Fulton Sheen. I could be wrong on that one. I believe it's recounted by Back then, he was Bishop Timothy Dolan in the book Priest for the Third Millennium.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know exactly what the setting was, but let's just pretend it's Fulton Sheen, just because why not?
Mm-hmm.
Where there was some sort of a big gathering of people, and in amongst the people there was some sort of famous actor, and he was called up to why don't we have them both Fulton Sheen and this actor read the 23rd Psalm. So the famous actor came up and read it, and it was all very dramatic and great. And then when he was done, everyone just kind of applauded, because it was such a great dramatic reading of the psalm. And then again, it might not have been Sheen, but let's pretend it is. Got up and proclaimed the 23rd Psalm, and when he was done, silence. And the comment that was made is, well, the actor knew the psalm, the bishop knew the shepherd. So there's a difference there too. I don't know where I would go with that in a homily, but I do like that anecdote. I guess I have to research it to find out how true the people were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the reality that the Lord is my shepherd, it really emphasizes that there's an actual real relationship, not hypothetical, not theoretical, but like a real lived relationship that we're called to have with God, who is our shepherd, and he's always drawing us into that relationship. So that'd be a different direction. I don't know if it really meshes with, it kind of meshes with the gospel. Gospel's all about Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So that could work. And yes, Gloria, Chloe needs the cone of shame. That's right. This is like, so if you're listening, my dog's wandering around in the background, whimpering away because she's got the cone of shame because it's minor surgery she had. But anyway, she'll get over it.
I think you can never go wrong with preaching the need for knowing Jesus Christ. Right. And whether or not it directly absolutely ties into the gospel, it ties into our life for sure. One of the things I might look at as well is the teacher in me kind of comes out. And when I see what are called Old Testament types of Jesus Christ start to come forward, and typology is a way of kind of reading the Old Testament. And the way I've often described it is typology is essentially looking at things that happen physically in the Old Testament as pointing ahead to a spiritual reality that's going to be fulfilled in Jesus Christ. And so when you see something like a shepherd, that is going to be what's called a type of Jesus Christ. It's going to foreshadow Jesus Christ. And there are all kinds of things. So if you're going through the daily readings and attending daily mass, we're getting the story of Moses right now. And so I think it was yesterday I preached on this idea that the typology of baptism, this idea of being delivered from death to life through water, because we get the story of Moses being saved from death, like all the Hebrew boys at the time were being put to death, but he is put into the basket and put into the river. And so he's delivered from death to life through water, which happens again, of course, as they pass through the Red Sea. And then when they pass into the promised land, they pass through water into that land promised. And so one of the things I might do is just start to introduce this idea of typing, of a type as a way, well, this one's pretty obvious because we know that the Lord calls himself a shepherd. I am the good shepherd, he says elsewhere in the gospel. And so when we hear this idea of a shepherd in the Old Testament, we're always supposed to be thinking ahead to, okay, what is this going to tell me about he who is the ultimate shepherd, who is the real shepherd, who is the fulfillment of what a good shepherd is supposed to be? I'm trying to look up at the first reading here because Jesus calls himself the good shepherd. Is there anything here, or at least in your version, that we get where it simply says maybe bad shepherd or evil shepherd, or I have shepherds who mislead and scatter the flock of my pasture.
Yeah.
It's people who scatter the sheep and drive them away. We get this contrast between that, which is obviously a bad shepherd, and Jesus, who simply says, I'm the good shepherd.
Yeah. Like he says the other shepherds, so I will attend to you for your evil doings.
Mm-hmm.
So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you kind of get a hint too of what the Good Shepherd does in the second reading. And then, the second readings during ordinary time, we're typically just reading through letters of St. Paul. So now we're in Ephesians, and it's chapter 2. And it's all about how Jesus came to reconcile, that he broken down the dividing wall that is the hostility between us. He abolished the law with its commandments. There was my dog. I don't know if you heard that, but anyway.
That one I heard.
I totally lost my train of thought, but anyway, yeah, that Jesus came to reconcile Jew, Gentile, basically everyone. I mean, that's kind of what the shepherd does, is gather his people together, right? Gather his sheep together. So he is the good shepherd. And on that note.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're talking about there, kind of one idea, one last thing that came to mind is the idea of shepherd gathering the people together. If you look at a flock of sheep, they need someone to follow. It's not like a group of fish. I remember looking at an aquarium and you have the school of fish, and somehow they all stay together and they're not following any one fish in particular. They're not following a bigger fish. They just kind of all stay together. Sheep don't do that. If sheep are not following a shepherd, they just scatter. And so the idea that on our own, we are not going to stay together. The source of our communion is the shepherd himself.
Yep. That's a great way to wrap that up. In other words, it's all about Jesus Christ.
Hopefully.
That's pretty great. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I see the chat has been pretty lively. Oh, and there's even a comment about green sambuca. That's pretty good. Thank you. So head over to homilychat.com. You can subscribe to the audio podcast. Usually I remember to post the video from YouTube there. Sometimes I forget, or head over to our Facebook page. All the links are there. And let us know what you heard as well. Because this, as you can tell, this week in particular seems to go all over the place a little bit. It's be interesting to hear what you guys heard. That's very interesting this weekend.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Let us know what you heard, because as Father Darryl said, we don't really have an idea yet. And I think the readings don't really lend themselves to one super obvious path to go. And so I think there's a wide variety of things that people might be preaching on this weekend. So let us know what you heard and get back to us.
Excellent. And until next time, I was going to say keep your stick on the ice, but the Stanley Cup's been awarded. So yeah.
Keep your sutures in.
Sounds good. All right. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.